Очередные санкции США против Ирана.
Navigator June
25. 2019 17:57. Новые санкции в целом можно назвать символическими. Их целями стал сам Верховный лидер Ирана и его канцелярия, а также ряд командующих КСИР, которых это может только позабавить.
https://www.whitehouse.gov/presidential-actions/executive order imposing sanctions respect Iran/ by the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act
50.
USC
1701.
@sec. EPA, the National Emergencies Act
50.
USC
1601.
@sec. Section
212.
F of the Immigration and Nationality Act of
1952. 8.
USC
1182.
F and Section
301.
of Title
3.
United States Code. I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, in order to take additional steps with respect to the national emergency declared in Executive Order
12957.
of March
15. 1995.
in light of the actions of the government of Iran and Iranian-backed proxies, particularly those taken to destabilize the Middle East, promote international terrorism, and advance Iran's ballistic missile program, and Iran's irresponsible and provocative actions in and over international waters, including the targeting of United States military assets and civilian vessels, hereby order. Section
1.
A. All property and interests in property that are in the United States, that hereafter come within the United States, or that are or hereafter come within the possession or control of any United States person of the following persons are blocked and may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt in. I, the Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Iranian Supreme Leader's Office, SLO, or 2. Any person determined by the Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State. A. To be a person appointed by the Supreme Leader of Iran or the SLO to a position as a state official of Iran, or as the head of any entity located in Iran or any entity located outside of Iran that is owned or controlled by one or more entities in Iran. B. To be a person appointed to a position as a state official of Iran, or as the head of any entity located in Iran or any entity located outside of Iran that is owned or controlled by one or more entities in Iran, by any person appointed by the Supreme Leader of Iran or the SLO. C. To have materially assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, or technological support for, or goods or services to or in support of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this section. D. To be owned or controlled by, or to have acted or purported to act for or on behalf of, directly or indirectly any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this section, or E. To be a member of the Board of Directors or a senior executive officer of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this section. B. The prohibitions in subsection A of this section apply except to the extent provided by statutes, or in regulations, orders, directives, or licenses that may be issued pursuant to this order, and notwithstanding any contract entered into or any license or permit granted before the date of this order. Sec.
2.
A. The Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State, is hereby authorized to impose on a foreign financial institution the sanctions described in subsection B of this section upon determining that the foreign financial institution has knowingly conducted or facilitated any significant financial transaction for or on behalf of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to section
1.
of this order. B. With respect to any foreign financial institution determined by the Secretary of the Treasury in accordance with this section to meet the criteria set forth in subsection A of this section, the Secretary of the Treasury may prohibit the opening, and prohibit or impose strict conditions on the maintaining, in the United States of a correspondent account or a payable through account by such foreign financial institution. C. The prohibitions in subsection B of this section apply except to the extent provided by statutes, or in regulations, orders, directives, or licenses that may be issued pursuant to this order, and notwithstanding any contract entered into or any license or permit granted before the date of this order. Sec.
3.
I hereby determine that the making of donations of the types of articles specified in section
203.
B
2.
of EPA
50.
USC
1701.
B
2.
by, to, or for the benefit of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to section
1.
of this order would seriously impair the President's ability to deal with the national emergency declared in Executive Order
12957.
and I hereby prohibit such donations as provided by section
1.
of this order. Sec.
4.
The prohibitions in section
1.
of this order include a. The making of any contribution or provision of funds, goods, or services by, to, or for the benefit of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order, and b. The receipt of any contribution or provision of funds, goods, or services from any such person. Sec.
5.
The unrestricted immigrant and non-immigrant entry into the United States of aliens determined to meet one or more of the criteria in subsection
1.
A of this order would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, and the entry of such persons into the United States, as immigrants or non-immigrants, is hereby suspended. Such persons shall be treated as persons covered by section
1.
of Proclamation
8693.
of July
24. 2011.
suspension of entry of aliens subject to United Nations Security Council travel bans and International Emergency Economic Powers Act sanctions. Sec.
6.
The Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State, is hereby authorized to take such actions, including adopting rules and regulations, to employ all powers granted to the President by EPA as may be necessary to carry out the purposes of this order, other than the purposes described in section
5.
of this order. The Secretary of the Treasury may, consistent with applicable law, redelegate any of these functions within the Department of the Treasury. All departments and agencies of the United States shall take all appropriate measures within their authority to implement this order. Sec.
7.
A. Any transaction that evades or avoids, has the purpose of evading or avoiding, causes a violation of, or attempts to violate any of the prohibitions set forth in this order is prohibited. B. Any conspiracy formed to violate any of the prohibitions set forth in this order is prohibited. Sec.
8.
For the purposes of this order. A. The term
Person.
means an individual or entity. B. The term
Entity.
means a partnership, association, trust, joint venture, corporation, group, subgroup, or other organization. C. The term
Foreign.
financial institution means any foreign entity that is engaged in the business of accepting deposits, making, granting, transferring, holding, or brokering loans or credits, or purchasing or selling foreign exchange, securities, commodity futures or options, or procuring purchasers and sellers thereof, as principal or agent. The term includes, but is not limited to, depository institutions, banks, savings banks, money service businesses, trust companies, securities brokers and dealers, commodity futures and options brokers and dealers, forward contract and foreign exchange merchants, securities and commodities exchanges, clearing corporations, investment companies, employee benefit plans, dealers in precious metals, stones, or jewels, and holding companies, affiliates, or subsidiaries of any of the foregoing. The term does not include the international financial institutions identified in
22.
USC
262R.
C.
2.
The International Fund for Agricultural Development, the North American Development Bank, or any other international financial institution so notified by the Secretary of the Treasury. D. The term
Knowingly.
with respect to conduct, a circumstance, or a result, means that a person has actual knowledge, or should have known, of the conduct, the circumstance, or the result, and the term
Унитет.
statesperson means any United States citizen, permanent resident alien, entity organized under the laws of the United States or any jurisdiction within the United States, including foreign branches, or any person in the United States. Sec.
9.
For those persons whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order who might have a constitutional presence in the United States, I find that because of the ability to transfer funds or other assets instantaneously, prior notice to such persons of measures to be taken pursuant to this order would render those measures ineffectual. I therefore determine that for these measures to be effective in addressing the national emergency declared in Executive Order
12957,
there need be no prior notice of a listing or determination made pursuant to Section
1.
of this order. Sec.
10.
A. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect I. The authority granted by law to an executive department or agency, or the head thereof, or 2. The functions of the Director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, or legislative proposals. B. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. C. This order is not intended to, and does not, create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. Sec.
11.
The measures taken pursuant to this order are in response to actions of the government of Iran occurring after the conclusion of their
1981.
Algiers Accords, and are intended solely as a response to those later actions. Donald J. Trump. The White House, June
24. 2019.
https://home.treasury.gov/news/press-releases/SM716. Washington, the U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, took action today against 8 senior commanders of Navy, Aerospace, and Ground Forces of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, IRGC. These commanders sit atop a bureaucracy that supervises the IRGC's malicious regional activities, including its provocative ballistic missile program, harassment and sabotage of commercial vessels in international waters, and its destabilizing presence in Syria. Today's designations reinforce the President's action in issuing an executive order imposing sanctions on the Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran as well as the Supreme Leader's office. The President's order will deny Iran's leadership access to financial resources and authorizes the targeting of persons appointed to certain official or other positions by the Supreme Leader or the Supreme Leader's office. Moreover, any foreign financial institution that knowingly facilitates a significant financial transaction for entities designated under this executive order could be cut off from the U.S. financial system. The United States is targeting those responsible for effectuating the Iranian regime's destructive influence in the Middle East. IRGC commanders are responsible for the Iranian regime's provocative attacks orchestrated in internationally recognized waters and airspace, as well as Iran's malign activities in Syria, said Treasury Secretary Stephen T. Mnuchin. Will continue to aggressively target the senior leaders and the financial apparatus sustaining this malign activity. This action is a warning to officials at all levels of the IRGC and the rest of the Iranian regime that we will continue to sanction those who export violence, sabotage, and terrorism. Overview of today's action. Today's action targets commanders of the IRGC's Navy, Aerospace, and Ground Forces, in addition to the commanders of the IRGC Navy's, IGCN, 5 naval districts. These include the naval district commanders who are responsible for the IGCN's activities off the coast of the southern provinces of Khuzestan, Bush, and Hormuzgan, which lie adjacent to the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. OFAC is designating IGCN Commander Alireza Tangsiri pursuant to EO
13224
for acting for or on behalf of the IRGC. As recently as February
2019.
Tangsiri threatened that the Iranian regime's forces would close the Strait of Hormuz, an international waterway, if U.S. sanctions stopped Iran's oil exports, and that the Iranian regime is prepared to target U.S. interests in the region. As the commander of the IGCN, Tangsiri sits atop a structure including those regional IGCN commanders sanctioned today that is responsible for the sabotage of vessels in the international waters. Also designated today pursuant to EO
13224
for acting for or on behalf of the IRGC is Amir Ali Hajizad, commander of the IRGC Aerospace Force, whose bureaucracy was responsible for downing the U.S. unmanned aircraft on June
20, 2019.
Hajizad oversees Iran's provocative ballistic missile program. OFAC is also designating pursuant to EO
13224
Mohammed Pakpour, commander of the IRGC's ground forces, for acting for or on behalf of the IRGC. Under Pakpour's command, the IRGC ground forces have deployed to fight in Syria in support of the IRGC Quds Force, IRGC-QF, and the brutal Assad regime. In
2017.
Pakpour said that the IRGC ground forces were in Syria to help the IRGC-QF. OFAC is also designating the commanders of the IGCN's 5 naval districts pursuant to EO
13224
for acting for or on behalf of the IRGC. The IRGC is responsible for the regime's destabilizing and provocative naval actions in and around the Strait of Hormuz. IGCN commanders of 5 naval districts designated today are IGCN
1st,
Naval District Commander Abbas Galamshah IGCN
2nd,
Naval District Commander Ramzan Zirai IGCN
3rd,
Naval District Commander Yadil Abadan IGCN
4th,
Naval District Commander Mansour Avankar IGCN
5th,
Naval District Commander Ali Osmai. The IRGC was designated pursuant to EO
13224
by OFAC on October
13, 2017.
and it was designated as a foreign terrorist organization by the Secretary of State on April
15, 2019.
Sanctions implications. As a result of today's action, all property and interests in property of these individuals that are in the United States or in the possession or control of U.S. persons must be blocked and reported to OFAC. OFAC's regulations generally prohibit all dealings by U.S. persons or within, or transiting, the United States that involve any property or interests in property of blocked or designated persons. In addition, persons that engage in certain transactions with the persons designated today may themselves be exposed to designation. Furthermore, any foreign financial institution that knowingly facilitates a significant transaction or provides significant financial services for any of the individuals designated today could be subject to U.S. correspondent account or payable through sanctions.
США, санкции, Иран.
Leave a comment.